My challenge for myself this month is to call this book Monster Core 2, not Monster Manual, not Bestiary. Let's see how well I do. October may be done, but it is Monster Month here on the No Direction Podcast because we are looking at Monster Core 2, the latest Monster book and the latest core book for the Pathfinder role-playing game. I'll be talking with Josh Birdsong, one of the lead designers of the Monster Core 2, of Monster Core 2, and not only will he be the interview segment where we'll be talking about the approach to the book and what the goals were for this specific Monster Core, but also, because it's the first time I've talked to Josh, he'll be the subject of this month's fireside chat as well as we find his path to Pathfinder. But before we get to that, one of the coolest things about Pathfinder monsters is the amount of world building they cram in there. People that were there for first edition might remember all the jokes about the aboliths. Did the aboliths do it? And this was a running theme that the aboliths were these world manipulators from below the sea, and that they had this great magic that could create ripple effects that affected people on land. And it was really just told through the flavor text of monster entries and the occasional ecology article. And it wasn't like, there was no the aboliths did it adventure path. It was just something that came up so often that one of the editors, I believe it was Wes Schneider, wrote on a whiteboard, did the aboliths do it? No. So I want to show how much story Paizo packs into every monster entry by picking a random monster here and telling you how it can be the subject of an entire adventure. So not just a single combat, but that it is the final fight, and the fact that it is the final monster at the end of this adventure will be foreshadowed based on scenes that use the information in its monster entry. Looking over the book, the first creature appears on page 8. It's the Adamant Sentinel. And the last one, the Zombie Dragon, appears on page 359. So I'm going to randomly pick a page between 8 and 359, and that will be the subject of our adventure, acknowledging that some monsters have multi-page spreads, and so they have a slightly higher chance, but less than an extra percentage point, even like not even a full percentage point higher, that they get picked. All right, I've called up random.org. We're sharing a number between, once again, page 8 and page 359. Let's see what creature is going to be the subject of an entire adventure. Page 24. Oh, that's early in the alphabet. I was going to say, what are the odds? But obviously, 1 in 351. Looking in the book, that is the Ambush Corpse. Sawed and axe-hewn timber grinds together as an ambush corpse moves, smashing through the forest. I almost feel like I have an unfair advantage here because I'd actually written a Transformer scenario where a log-like sound wave that I'm sure had a clever name, a clever tree-based pun that I'm forgetting now. But I actually already have a scenario in mind for this. I will try to come up with a whole new scenario that is not connected to my tree sound wave scenario that I'd already come up with. So the first thing I want to look at is the creature's level, and it is level 13. That's a good number. That means that we can make it like a campaign-ending threat for a 10th level party, which, you know, not every campaign goes to 20 levels, and if you've got the kind of party that, or you have the kind of players that just really like creating new characters and exploring new characters and often want to reset a campaign, ending at level 10 with a level 13 threat, that works. Next, we're going to look over the flavor. So not just the description at the top under Ambush Corpse. Oh, I'm sorry, it's an Ambush Copse. I hope I'm saying that right. Oh, Copse? Copsy? Cops? It's worth looking up. Do I trust Cambridge Dictionary or Julian Miquel, who has correctly with an exclamation point? I find that sus, so I'm going to go with, actually, no, I'll go with Merriam-Webster. Cops. Cops. An ambush copse. Sawed and axe-hewn timber grind together as an ambush copse moves, smashing through the forest. Cuts and burns mar the bark of this gigantic angry moss of whirling deadly logs. The forest never forgets. It remembers the hatchets, the rasping saws, and the smoke of crackling wood fires. It remembers the carts taking ancient trees away to cut, shape, and burn. Fey meddling or errant elemental magic draw such memories out alongside the rage and sorrow of the forest to form an ambush copse. An ambush copse exacts its ire on villages along the woodcutter's path or waits for intruders to step into its forest domain. While an ambush copse might be mistaken for a wounded arboreal, it can cease movement to appear as an overgrown pile of logs or a partially collapsed hovel. There, it waits for retribution. Once again, feel like I'm cheating because it has basically laid out what the story will be. The story will be something's going wrong along a route between a forest and a city that has a lumber industry. So right there we know our quest giver could definitely be some kind of lumberjack. It could also be a concerned parent in the same city as a lumber industry. And that way, when the quest giver gets in contact with the party, yes, we'll go with this. So, concerned parent, classic quest giver. Child or children have gone missing while exploring the forest. It is in this lumber town. We need some investigation about what is going on. So I know I had talked about the possibility of it being a campaign ending quest, but this feels more like this is a side quest. This is a new objective divorced from the main objective of the campaign. So anytime your roughly 13th level party needs a distraction, needs a break from the meta plot of the campaign, if they find themselves in an urban environment, preferably one that you can arguably say has a lumber industry, you can insert this adventure. You know what? I said missing children. Let's take it a step back and just say missing family member. Because as a rule, Paizo doesn't have child endangerment in its adventures. And so even though this is not something that's being published by Paizo, we know that it's consistent with the campaign and the adventures that are set in the Lost Omens era, that generally you will not have to worry about missing children. So let's do an indirect. Let's say someone's brother is missing. And the reason I like saying a brother is that it's not as personal as a spouse. It's definitely not as personal as children. And it gives more reason to investigate. Okay, so we know what the brother is to our quest giver. Let's say it's a woman, just so that when I'm using the he and she pronouns, you're knowing whether I'm talking about the quest giver or the victim. So her brother's missing. We know their relationship. No, we know their connection, but it gives us a step we can investigate with their relationship, because sibling relationships can be complicated. Are they close? Was there something that separated them, some kind of wedge that was driven between them and the family? One step of the investigation is to look into it, because players have been conditioned to suspect their quest givers, because so many GMs will have the quest giver twist that they were the ones that did it all along. And so by having it be a sibling, it means that there could be something to that relationship that would justify the player's suspicion. And we, as mature and experienced GMs, know not to do the old quest giver is secretly the villain cliche, but it's still worth having that as a plot point of the adventure so that we can eliminate it right away. So we will say that they have a fairly good relationship, but they're older now, so they don't see each other on a daily basis, and so it may have been a couple of days since he went missing. Who is this brother? He's either a lumberjack, or maybe he's a coachman who works the cart that brings the lumber back and forth. He's definitely involved in the lumber industry. And our quest giver, maybe not necessarily, although could be a benefactor of the lumber industry. So somebody that, say, polishes the axes. Let's say our quest giver is a blacksmith. She is regularly visited by the lumberjacks who need their saws and their axes sharpened and cleaned. Before we go on with the story, every monster in Monster Core has this sidebar. The layout of the Monster Cores has been consistent since second edition, and I really like it because it's you don't see this layout in any other book, where it's a 3/4 column on the inside of the page is the meat of the page, and then there's this sidebar that gives you any kind of information you want. It is really formulaic to what's on the inside. We know how a monster stat block looks, and then it's dealer's choice for what appears on the sidebar. So let's read the sidebar for the ambush copse. Ravages of revenge. An endless wait for revenge invariably leaves an ambush copse riddled with mushrooms and termites. Apply the weak adjustment to such an ambush copse and give it weakness 10 to bludgeoning damage. During a period of dormancy, parts of the ambush copse might break off, gain their own sentience, and make their way into a nearby camp or village. Like, if I really wanted to do that Soundwave version, like, that is exactly how I would have Ravage and Laserbeak, but again, is not what we're doing this time. Use the stats for a Twigjack, Monster Core 332, to represent these stray pieces whose arrival might presage the full awakening of an ambush copse. So again, they're making my job too easy of taking this randomly picked monster and making it an adventure. So I was like, when I conceptualized this topic, I was like, there are secret ways that you can read a stat block, and if you can unlock the hidden lore within, you will find yourself an adventure. We have its minions picked out, we have its main motivation, we have its setting. Like, so much has already been established just by reading the description. Now let's talk about the stats, and we'll see how we can incorporate them into the story. It has Tremor Sense, so right away I know that when we do the final encounter, it's going to be hidden somewhere, and it will know when the PCs are there. So that's cool. It is ambush cops, so it being able to tell that the PCs are in its area and get the jump on them, fully delivering on the concept of this creature. Languages is not really going to come up, and it can't speak. So even if we have a druid in the party or a ranger, or, a cleric of some kind of nature domain, this is probably not going to get sidetracked by much diplomacy. This is a creature built on revenge and will not participate in any verbal communication and any verbal diplomacy. But just overall, while we should be aware as GMs that this is a forest-based fey creature, or at least one that can speak fey, looking at its traits, it's actually an elemental, a wood elemental. It's not, actually its intelligence is 0 and its charisma is 0. So there we go. We should be prepared if we have a druid or a druid type character in the party. We should be prepared for them to want to solve this in some non-combat way, but it's really not given us many options. So that is something that they may bring to the table, and we need to sell that that it's futile. So try it, fail, reassure them that yes, you are fighting a creature of wood, but you are not going against the wishes of the tree spirits, that this is something that is like, it's almost plant undead. So they shouldn't feel like they are going against their oath, but feel free to let them roleplay that and add a character-based dynamic to any encounter and the entire investigation involved in this creature. But whether we have that type of character in the party or not doesn't really affect how we're going to lay out the plot. It's just how it's going to run. All right, it has a weakness to axe and fires. Perfect. If it didn't, I would probably make one up. It is resistant to bludgeoning and piercing. So it's funny, when I was reading the sidebar and it was talking about how when it's rotting, it might be vulnerable to bludgeoning, but to me, like, trying to break, no, I suppose. All right, so once wood gets like waterlogged, if you try and hit it with the axe, it absorbs more of the impact. So I don't have a lot of experience whacking a waterlogged branch or log with a blunt object. So maybe in the research, the game designer, or maybe just through their own, drawing their own conclusions, they decided that waterlogged branch would be more vulnerable to that. I don't know. I just know that when it is not waterlogged, which ours will not be, it is resistant to bludgeoning and piercing, but axes really have its number, and fires even more so. Berserk is interesting. An ambush copse that sees fire or axes has a chance of going berserk. So it's not even like it has to take the damage and then it will potentially go berserk. If it's even aware of it, and I know it says sees, I would allow for the tremor sense. I don't know if you can tremor sense fire. So I guess it would have to pop out of the ambush and then witness what they are wielding and realize that, oh no, this is bad for me. At the start of its turn, if it is aware of an axe or fire the size of a lit torch or larger, so, odds are if they have a fire, it'll be a lit torch. The ambush cops must succeed at a DC 5 flat check or go berserk. I like that. I like DC 5 because as the GM, I like going into an encounter not even knowing how it's going to play out in certain ways. And so I know that this will be a combat encounter, and I haven't read the results, like the effects of going berserk. I assume it's going to change the pitch and make it more deadly, but possibly less clever in how I would roleplay it. But DC 5 is so low that it's just something that would be like a low-level concern that I get to explore every turn. A Berserk Ambush Copse can't use concentrate actions and wildly attacks the nearest living creature or the nearest object if no creatures are nearby. Excellent. So that turns things around. I actually was hoping there would be some kind of advantage to going Berserk. There isn't. That's kind of unfortunate. I would have liked to increase damage. But in any case, it does make it attack the nearest living creature, so ideal situation now would be we have a druid in the party. The druid is trying to reason with it, and it is losing its mind and attacks the druid because the fighter has a torch. That gives the players a chance to roleplay, like, put out the fire, it's clearly reacting to the fire. And yet it still puts the druid in danger, and now they have to decide if they're going to fight back or not. Again, this is all a theoretical party. We can play this out in any way, but that is something that I can see a dynamic that can be brought to an encounter involving this creature. Blinding Branches. It is a reaction. When a creature within 20 feet of the ambush copse leaves a square during a move action it's using. This is a huge creature, so I have a feeling it's going to be able to reach creatures within 20 feet, and it's going to mess with people as they get close. And Blinding Branches, obviously, it's going to mess with their eyesight. So the triggering creature is in forest terrain. Okay. Oh, interesting. So it's not necessarily the ambush copse it's not their branches that are blinding the creature. The effect: the ambush copse's elemental energy animates nearby tree branches to swat at the creature's face. Triggering creature must succeed at a DC 30 reflex save or become blinded for 1 round. I like it. I like a lot of things about that. That is a high DC. Level 13, so maybe not necessarily, but it's a reflex, so it's definitely only certain members of the party will be expected to reliably beat that. It is blinded for 1 round, so we do get to deal with the problems of being blind, but it's not going to ruin somebody's night where they thought they were going to have fun, rolling dice and killing a monster. They are going to have to deal with this blinded condition. But if they just wait it out, then they eventually get their turn, and they know to approach more cautiously. Felling Ambush is another reaction, so that's something as a GM I do have to be aware of, that I have 2 different reactions, which means it's not my turn. I cannot go into the stat block and just kind of read up what I'm going to do next. At every single player's turn, I have to be watching for 2 different scenarios that could trigger a reaction. That is not ideal. As a GM, it puts a lot of load on my mind at a time when I am already juggling multiple things. So I would have to approach this differently and expect the scenario to play out a little more slowly, because I will have less time between my turn to plan my next turn and, just plan out my descriptions and whatnot. I'm not talking necessarily tactically, but just playing out the emotion of the scene. Because I have 2 reactions on my mind, I will have to rely a lot more on my improv and a lot less on my thought. So what does Felling Ambush do? A creature moves within 10 feet of the ambush copse. Okay, so at least the only thing I'm worried about is people getting within a certain distance of my creature. And actually, I didn't even think about this, but this is great when it's laying in wait. Like, the Blinding Branches, it could be totally hidden. What is my stealth? My stealth is plus 25 in forests. So it could be totally hidden. The PCs know that this is the area that this thing is definitely found in. They walk into it, and unbeknownst to them, they get within 20 feet of the copse. Oh, tree in the eye. Good luck finding this hidden creature. It's a lot more clever. The Blinding Branches, it's a lot more clever design than I realized initially. So Felling Ambush is when they get within 10 feet. So now it's like, all right, it's gotten past the loose branches. Oh, and going back to, I was surprised it wasn't just the thing poking them in the eye. That's why. It's because it is trying to stay hidden. So it is attacking the PCs even from a hiding spot. So Felling Ambush, trigger. Creature moves within 10 feet of the ambush copse. The ambush copse, requirements. The ambush copse is disguised as tree or logs. And effect, the ambush copse makes a log strike against the triggering creature. If the attack hits, the creature must attempt a DC 30 reflex save or be knocked prone. So, okay. I don't really have to keep track of this in the combat like I was concerned about earlier. Because this is really all going to happen once, the PCs will slowly be closing in, and once the cops is like, all right, they're definitely going to find me, I need to attack now, this is their attack. They get to attack with their log strike, which is their main melee attack. And if they hit, they also happen to knock the creature down. Going through some of its other stats, speed 30 feet. Okay, so once it does reveal itself, it is a bit of a slogger, so it's not going to be able to maneuver around the battlefield much, but I picture this as a solo creature encounter. I know they were talking about bringing in the twig jacks, but I see them more as like encounters leading up to the final encounter. I think the final encounter will be this one creature against the party. Although, it's worth reconsidering. We know exactly what minion to throw in there if we want to throw off the action economy of the group and give a little more variety to the space and, make sure that the casters don't just stand in the back blasting this thing with fireball after fireball until this giant, vulnerable to fire wooden creature falls. So I have convinced myself we're going to throw in a couple of twig jacks, a creature I'm not familiar enough with to know what their level is, so we'll have to figure out what the appropriate threat is after the fact. But what I am conceptualizing right now is that the ambush cops with some twig jacks nearby, or twiggy jacks? No, twig jacks. I saw the dot over the J and thought there was an IJ. I kind of like twiggy jacks better, but twig jacks. The twig jacks will be laying in wait. They are the reserves. Reserve minions. Because, once this thing pops up, even if people haven't read the stat block, the idea that you use fire against a wood creature, pretty obvious. Going back to its stats, its log has the backswing, forceful, and sweep traits, and has a reach of 20 feet, does 3d12 plus 14 bludgeoning damage plus pounding smash. I'm going to have to look these up before I run this encounter, but I can tell you that they all sound like they take care of a lot of creatures around it and deal a lot of damage. And ranged attack. It can throw a caber. That's fun. I go back and forth about whether I like that every single attack has a flavorful but inconsequential name. And when I see something like a wood creature having a caber attack as its ranged attack, it puts me back on the side of like, yes, I like this. Some of these flavor choices make me smile. So it can throw it up to 40 feet away. I don't see us using that too often, especially if we use the twig jacks as our minions. If the twig jacks put the level of the encounter too high for a party, then that is a good alternative. Although knowing that the person in the back blasting you with fire is just one thing that's happening while you're most likely being surrounded by several other people, mostly attacking with melee. Although I guess, if you've got one, say a barbarian type or a fighter type or a champion as the front line for a party that mostly goes in the back line, having a pretty, like a plus 25 is only slightly smaller than a plus 27, so it's still a pretty reliable ranged attack. 40 feet is, like, it's not a longbow, but in my experience, on a battle map, 40 feet is a good chunk of the battle map, so there's a good chance that a character is within that range. Feign Corpse. Oh, that's fun. This is a single action. Until the next time it acts, the ambush cops appears to be a harmless patch of trees or logs. It has an automatic result of 43 or 45 in forest on deception checks and DCs to pass as trees or logs. So let me just double check. Until the next time it acts. So I'm trying to figure out if this feels like something you would do before the combat. Like, this explains why it's so hard to see. I'm trying to figure out if this is something I could actively use as a GM in the middle of the combat. And I suppose if enough people get blinded, although it only has the one reaction. So I find it hard to believe that even if it's passing for a log, that the PCs wouldn't be able to narrow down that if we set fire to that pile of logs where the ambush copes just sat down, even though it looks like just a pile of logs, like, I've played Breath of the Wild, I can tell where the chameleons, the Lizalos, are hiding, even if they're camouflaged. So like, I doubt I would ever use that in combat unless, like, unless you had something like an Obscuring Mist type spell. I don't see this playing into it. All right, Pounding Smash, which is one of the riders of the melee attack. Regardless of whether the strike hits or misses, the ambush cops' melee strikes create a 5-foot square of difficult terrain in the target space. Handy. I like that kind of effect. It is flavorful, and it also adds issues that the party has to slowly deal with. 5-foot space of difficult terrain is not going to be something that it's not likely to trip them up, but it is something that, if it does factor into it, you're like, you bet you wish it hadn't smashed that spot now. And it's also fairly easy for me to just take out, the brown dry erase marker, mark the spot on the ground that is now difficult terrain, and the longer the combat goes, the more difficult terrain surrounds it, and you're realizing that, you are now trapped in this circle of, this circle that is slowing you down with this giant creature that is out to kill you. Pulverizing Barrage. 3 actions. The ambush cops takes 3 log strikes, each at a -2 penalty, so the annoying multi-attack penalty, all targeting the same creature. 3 log strikes, which again do 3d12 plus 14 damage each, 3 against the same creature. The ambush cops' multiple attack penalty doesn't increase until after it has made all 3 attacks. Okay. The ambush cops gains the clumsy 2 condition until the beginning of its next turn. I'm trying to picture when I would choose to use that, because -2 will probably not, -2 on 3 attacks is better than -0, -5, -10, for a total of -15 across 3 attacks. -6 across 3 attacks is obviously a lot better. The math is in its favor. The fact that I have to focus on a single character, 1, feels mean, and 2, does not feel particularly strategic, although if it is Berserk, then we know it is focused on the nearest living creature, so that would be a good time to be to change how this thing is working. If it was not running Berserk, all right, attack here, attack there, attack whomever. Going Berserk, it's fully focused on that one closest living creature. If it's an animal companion, I feel extra bad. If it's a PC, they can roll up a new character. But that animal companion can never be brought back. So yes, because it is so focused on a single character, I expect I would mostly only use this in Berserk mode, but I am not forced to. I can choose, and if in the scenario I get within 20 feet of a pyromancer, then yeah, I am definitely going to focus all of my attacks on that single major threat to this creature. Sunder Objects. When an ambush corpse damages an item or structure, it deals additional 15 damage to that item or structure. I mean, that's the last one. That's kind of a weak thing that I don't expect to come into play. But, that's just how the alphabet works with the way they listed these abilities. All right, so my question is, what of these things can we use to foreshadow that this is the creature that will be at the end of the adventure, and to use it to inform the players of what to expect when they finally do attack it? So easily I can see that, all right, they are looking for this blacksmith's brother, and they come across the local physician. I forget the era-appropriate term. I don't think it's apothecary, so we'll just say physician. And they are treating people with, scarred eyes. So even though the blinding only lasts for the 1 round, we can definitely, if you get a tree in the eye, the first thing you would do when you get back to town is be like, am I okay? I couldn't see anything for a solid 6 seconds. Am I going to be okay? So that gives us someone that they can interact with, that they can not interrogate, but question. It gives us a social scene, and it gives us an information giver. So if this happens to multiple people, in fact, they can find someone there at the beginning of the investigation, and if the investigation's slowing down, instead of reminding them, hey, remember that person that went blind, you didn't ask them enough questions or whatever, we can bring in a second blind person. Now we are reinforcing the idea that, this is something that is happening in this town, in that forest down yonder, which just happens to be where the missing brother works. And so there's enough arrows pointing you in that direction that's where you're going next. No, I didn't think too highly of Sunder Objects, but you know what? It could actually be a major clue for us, in that we are talking to the blacksmith, and maybe the reason that she thought to look for her brother is because somebody came back from the forest. They just happened to find a whole bunch of axes that, they've been busted up. Could she fix them? And she'll look at it and it's like, this was my dad's axe. He gave it to my brother. He would never let this family heirloom go missing, and even if it broke, his sister's a blacksmith. He wouldn't just discard it in the forest. Come to think of it, I haven't seen my brother in a while. So that gives us a good clue that contextualizes something that this creature can do. And even if it doesn't come up in the encounter, after the adventure, the GM can be like, hey, you remember that broken axe? Well, I didn't use this against you, but sunder object is something that this creature can do. So I was hoping that we'd be able to create at least 3 scenes hinting towards the ambush corpse. So we've got the quest giver scene, we've got the broken axe clue, we've got the blinded lumberjack clue. What's one last thing we can do to really drive home? Oh, you know what would be fun? If we have like a kid in town singing a nursery rhyme. I know it's a bit of a cliche, but if you feel like writing a nursery rhyme and just having the kids in town singing them while they're doing hopscotch or something, and after a little bit of investigation, the players start to clue in that the context of or some of the lines in that really sound like they're talking about some kind of tree creature that blinds people and gives them a chance to look into it, gives the bard a chance, if we've got a bard in the party or some other kind of performance-based character, can use their expertise in this area to be like, oh, well, historically, nursery rhymes are often ways to make children feel better about terrible things that are happening around it and also for them to understand it. And then what could be fun is then if as soon as the PCs reach the forest, where we've given them any indication that like there is some horrible monster according to this song, some horrible tree monster, then we throw a single twig jack at them and just play up like the similarities between the song and the twig jack, which again, I don't know this creature, but just based on the name and the fact that it's a minion of the ambush cops, that according to the sidebar could just be a piece that's fallen off a rotting ambush cops, I imagine it's pretty small. And so that can definitely give the players the idea of like, oh, the GM bamboozled us. They made us think there was some giant tree monster, but it's just this tiny little twig jack. So they fight the one twig jack, defeat it easily, and then get poked in the eye. Wait, but the twig jack's dead. How did I get poked in the eye? And then you can do the ambush cops as the actual threat. So that's a fun way of making this combat a little more memorable. And then we can throw in a few more of those twig jacks, and they will need less explaining, even if they're coming in a couple of rounds later, because we've already introduced them as one of the villains of this scenario. So that means that when you introduce these new players in the combat, you don't have to spend a lot of time describing them because the players are already familiar with them. So that'll speed up this change to the landscape of the combat. We're looking at a single session, I think. I think depending on how good your players are in investigating, we are looking at about 2 hours of them in town talking around. And the bigger that we make this town or the city, the longer it can take for them to get to the blind person and the fact that there's a lumber industry. The longer you have for this adventure and the more your players are engaged with role-playing and like city exploration type scenes, investigation scenes, the bigger you make that city. If you're pressed for time, if this is like, I am trying to introduce a party to Pathfinder, don't do a 13th level adventure, but just if that's the scenario you're in, smaller cities, you can go from clue to clue to clue to the twig fight, the twig jack fight, to the ambush cops. Plenty of opportunities to make this very flavorful, plenty of opportunities for a lot of role-playing, plenty of opportunities for a lot of story that, regardless of whether it has anything to do with the meta plot of the campaign, will be a memorable session. Maybe 2. And that is just one of hundreds of new monsters introduced in Monster Core 2. So if you are interested in learning more about what's in this book, you can check out my conversation with Joshua Birdsong, one of the lead designers of Monster Core 2, in the next 2 segments that will be coming out this month. First one talking about Monster Core 2 and all the goodies that you can find in it. And then if you're curious about Joshua and how he got to Pathfinder, you can stick around for the fireside chat. Thank you for joining me for another episode of No Direction. If you'd like to know more about the products that we put out, the podcast and the blogs, you can check out nodirectionpodcast.com. And if you want to support the channel, you can go to patreon.com/nodirection. Until next time, I'm Ryan Costello. If you want to find the path,